Hey, let's talk about options. Throw everything, all the retail logic that you have ever learned about options out the window because, to be honest, options are skewed to be completely against you, and it's the most illegal thing that Wall Street introduced to the retail community, right? I have met a few options traders that were consistent with trading options, but they were all ex market makers, and they knew the time, place, strategy, and percentage of their portfolio that they would use this in. Trading in general is not what people think it is. It isn't about sitting around in deep thought about thinking about the cause and effect of an event and then coming up with the perfect model or outthinking the world because of that event. What you trade doesn't matter. You should look for opportunities and then look for the product where the opportunity exists. You don't need to know calculus. You don't need to know fundamentals or economics. That's the farthest from the truth. It's about building a process, a systematic idea regarding a premium discount level, and then sticking to it, right? We are looking for an effect and then to study that effect to figure out how to trade that effect. We look at the world from a broad level approach and then build a logical trading strategy around it. This is how you learn how to trade and find an edge. The theory you need might depend on the product you trade, such as options pricings. So let's talk about trading options. In options trading, there isn't a lot of non-linear things you have to consider, right? A lot of the retail folks think it has to do with the Greeks or implied volatility, blah, blah, blah. It's none of that, right? However, to be good at trading options, you need to know how to trade first, right? So look at this picture. The theta ganger, he's going to make his broker very rich because he just trades the trade. He supposes that trade edge is everywhere. And then you can get the theory boy who thinks there's a holy grail process out there that can crack the market. These are both the extremes, and they're the most common retail traders out there, and it's the most common mistake that 90% of traders take, right? You want to be in the middle, and you want to understand the market is a very competitive, adaptive system, and it's hard to get persistent edge in it, right? You want to orientate your trading around obvious, observable, indisputable observations. It used to be about mathematics like chaos theory and catastrophe theory. Now it's about machine learning. You find an edge, then you learn how to trade that edge. Without an edge, you're using the wrong tool. You're using a hammer to fix a pipe. Neither theory boy or theta gamer makes money consistently. It is like shooting an arrow. You aim for the biggest target just to hit while you practice getting it in the small ring of that target, right? First thing, you start with the obvious. There's a ton of things you can own and have no idea what they do because that isn't the edge. That is like new driven luck or disluck. It's 50-50 gambling. If there's not a defined edge, you don't need to be trading. So if you just trade the underlying, your payout is linear with respect to the change in price. You're rewarded a lot if it goes up and you're penalized if it goes down. And that's how you build the range, and you can predict the range based off of a time factor. If there's one thing you learn in trading with this lesson is you want to minimize the number of things you can screw up. Options give you a whole dimensions on ways you can be wrong, right? There's a lot of them for the underlying. They're less liquid and more expensive, and they expire and have constant change in sensitivities, making them more complicated to manage than just trading the underlying. If you're just making directional trades, just trade the underlying. It's easier and cheaper. We trade options because we can do unique things with them. You're a trader first who happens to trade options. The reason you trade options is because you are trading the volatility. And the cool thing about volatility is you can predict volatility. Like we found something that we can predict, and then we know how to trade. So now we just have to find our edge. Options are actually a terrible directional trading tool. You need to have volatility views, and if you don't and just trade directional, you should go with the cheapest, most liquid thing available. Options are designed to be an inventory adjustment hedge for people who deal with inventory, right? AKA risk control. They are an insurance contract and have been transformed into a speculation tool. So let's discuss how you make money by you can go long an option contract, or when you short, which is sell an options contract, One pays you for having FOMO, aka momentum, and one pays you when nothing happens at all, which happens a lot more than something happens, right? Fundamentally, you get paid to do what other people don't want to do, right? We don't get paid to do fun and interesting things in the options arena. Like, one of the things that was drummed into my head in the institutions is you're meant to be a smart guy, and eventually you will trade and make money. But until then, you got to do the stuff useful for us, right? How this relates to trading option is you need to do the dumb stuff to learn the smart stuff. Don't convince yourself in them, like, as you go down the options road, that you build models that the market needs, right? Because you're going to get smoked, right? So let's talk about edge and then how we're going to do this, right? When finding an edge, we need to identify a phenomenon that is clear and inarguable, right? Number two, understand why it exists. Decide how to monetize the effect in a direct way, an RR ratio, right? Decide how to systematically manage that risk, right? And we're going to do this with a systematic risk premium edge, right? Risk is everything. That is the edge, right? There is one good thing and everything else is bad, right? So when finding an edge, right, like, we need to make sure it's big and obvious, and we can't fuck up the implementation and still make money, because we know we're going to fuck it up and we're not going to make money from it, right? So let's talk about these 4 ETFs and how we're going to build an edge around it. Okay, so this is the part where you take notes, because you're going to need to know what these terms are and ETFs are when I teach you the first systematic risk premium edge later in the week, right? So what is the VIX, right? The VIX index is measured of expected volatility of the S&P 500 index over the next 30 days derived from the price. So this is something we'll talk more into, but whenever you take the last 30 days of historical realized volatility, which is the high and low of every day, right? That's called the wiggleness. And then you square root it, and the expected annualized variance over the next 30 days will make the implied volatility, which we'll talk a lot more about, right? For now, all you need to know is when you hear historical or realized vol, that's past movements, and implied is predicting future movements, right? So like I said, the VIX index is the range and wiggles the S&P options market thinks the SPX price will be over the next 30 calendar days, right? And you can't trade it, right? Just looking at it, you can tell you can't trade it. If you could trade this, you just buy it low and sell it high, and the market doesn't let you get away with the obvious easy money like that. But you can trade VIX futures. So what are VIX futures? VIX futures are bets on the value of the VIX index at the expiration date of the futures contract. In most futures, like wheat futures or crude oil futures, it is priced to prevent arbitrage where the price is now, right? So there is no bet to where the price will be in the future, right? That's where trading comes in. The VIX futures are a bet where the VIX will be in the futures. The SPV IXSTR index, right, is an index which weights the first 2 VIX futures to replicate the P&L of a daily rolled 30-day to expiry long position in the VIX futures, right? Just like most futures contracts, you have multiple contracts, right? You have a February, a quarterly contract. And that'll be something we talk very detailed in the future about, like how to take trade. Lastly, we'll talk about the UVXY. The UVXY is an ETF that seeks daily percentage returns on the net asset, right? So 1.5 times the daily percentage return of the S&P 500 VIX short-term future under index, right? So the SPV IXSTR index, right? So this is a lot of information. So write down the 4, and then the next video we'll talk, and I'll send you some supplementary videos to catch you up on the stuff that you might not know. And then in the next video, we'll talk about how to find a risk premium edge just with these 4 contracts to trade. And just remember, if you're trying to trade directional, the realized volatility, then you trade the underlying. If you're trying to predict the implied volatility, which is the future, you trade options, right? Because you can predict the variance of it. Hopefully this helps, and just let me know any feedback that you have later.